So I learned some Torah from Rabbi Claudia Marbach recently, which I want to share. She is on the faculty at Hebrew College in Boston, and I've never met her, but was very taken by her insights on how the Jewish community can better embrace people with disabilities into the core of our congregations. She starts, a blind man was walking down the street at night with a light in one hand and a white cane in the other. And someone was walking in the opposite direction, was puzzled and asked, "Why are you carrying a light?" The blind person replied, "As long as I carry the light, people can see me coming and come to my aid so that I don't trip or fall." The story actually originates in the Talmud, Masechet Megillah, and Rabbi Yossi is puzzled by something. In a verse in Deuteronomy, it says that you will grope around at noontime as a blind person gropes in the darkness. And Rabbi Yossi says, well, what difference does it make to a blind person? He asks whether it be at day or at night, because he can't see in either place. And the Gemara responds with a story that shows a person with a disability teaches us responsibility. As a sighted person, the sighted person is invited into the relationship from an unexpected direction. Let me explain. As a Jewish community, we still have a lot more to think about and improve our efforts for inclusion with people with disabilities. So many imagine what the American Jewish community looks like, but it is simply a myth that we have. Wealthy, suburban, happy, mom, dad, a few kids, a touch of anxiety, but therapy, which we don't really talk about, will help. I'm so glad that we talked about it today. That is not what I see in the hallways and the classrooms and services and cafes. I see a community far more diverse and beautiful. At Bethel, we embrace a diversity of families and individuals, backgrounds, and paths which brought people to Judaism and here. But in that light, how then are we to react when we read in this week's Parsha and more that Kohanim may be barred from working in the Mishkan because of their disability? The Torah says, "Speak unto Aaron and say, no man of your offspring throughout the ages who has a defect shall be qualified to offer the bread of his God. No one at all who has a defect," the mum that I talked about before, "shall be qualified. No man who is blind or lame or has a limb too short or too long. No man who has a broken leg or broken arm, a hunchback, a dwarf, who has a growth in his eye or a boil, scar, or scurvy, a Kohen Bal Mum." That is the term that's used. A priest with a disability was barred from his familial calling. His father and brothers, uncles, everyone he knew got to go up to Jerusalem for 2 weeks a year to serve in the temple. These Kohanim who lived scattered amongst the tribes of Israel were sent off to do their service with a fanfare. The non-Kohanim from the districts, from the cities, wherever they lived, had a mini festival to celebrate that their Kohen, representing their community, was participating in this central worship, this centrality of devotion in Jerusalem. It was a point of pride, not just for the Kohen doing his duty, but for the entire town where he was from. They must have had nachas, pride, in their Kohen doing the sacred rituals. But of course, this was denied to the Kohanim that had a disability. So let's put ourselves in the place of a sad Mr. Aaron the Kohen, who had the chickenpox as a kid and had chickenpox scars, or a limp because they hadn't yet invented a hip replacement surgery, who had to stay at home even though, as far as he could see, his disability would not make much of a difference in his service to God, and certainly could be accomplished with only a small accommodation. Some commentators say that the physical labor of the Beit HaMikdash would have been too much for the Kohen Balmum. But there were many aspects to the work in the Beit HaMikdash. Perhaps some of the work would be difficult, but not everyone needed to lift the animal onto the altar for sacrifice. Surely someone needed to mix the ingredients for the incense offering. Just in last week's reading, we read, "Do not curse the deaf or place a stumbling block in front of the blind." There, we were commanded to be holy in part by not placing these stumbling blocks in front of those with disabilities. And then in this week's reading, in contrast, the Torah itself is putting a mishkol, a stumbling block, based solely upon the physical disabilities in front of a Kohen who really wants to serve God. What is more, the disability is God-given. We like to think of God as the giver of blessings. There's a story in Masechet Ta'anit, another section of the Talmud, that highlights our discomfort in this respect. It says that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar was traveling and happened upon a man who was extremely ugly. Had to be really ugly for the Talmud to describe him like that. But the man said, "Shalom to you, Rabbi." And Rabbi Simeon did not reply. Instead, he said, "Idiot, how you are such an ugly person. Could it be that all the people of your city are as ugly as you?" And the man said, "I don't know. Why not go ask the artisan who made me and tell him how ugly that vessel is that you made?" And Rabbi Simeon realized that he had misspoken. His discomfort, he dismounted from his donkey and fell down at the man's feet, saying, "I fully accept. Please forgive me." I will not forgive you," the man said, "until you go to the artist who made me and tell him how ugly the vessel it is that you made." Now, of course, the artist in the story is, of course, God. And Rabbi Simeon insults the man because of his appearance, and the lesson is that Rabbi Simeon is insulting God, who created him that way. Too often we do that when we see a person with a disability. We too easily see the disability, but not the person who also was made B'Tselem Elohim, also in the image of God. And for those with unseen challenges, our sight is even more limited. How can we see that we are variations of the vessels that God has made? Today, we might think it is outdated that a person with a disability is not fit to appear before a ruler, before the artist, before God. We have members of Congress with prosthetic legs who use wheelchairs and other unseen and seen devices that we have accepted that people with disabilities can be leaders of our country. Of course, Republican governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, uses a wheelchair after he was jogging when he was 26 years old and a tree fell on him. Or Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth lost both legs and was injured in her arm by an RPG attack while serving in the Army National Guard in Afghanistan. And a little further back in history, we had President Franklin Roosevelt, who was elected 4 times despite being paralyzed from the waist down. But even for Roosevelt, he went to great lengths to not show the nation himself in the wheelchair. So what do we do with the text like that we have today? A text that says the Kohen cannot have physical disformities. Interestingly, halakha has evolved on this issue as it does on many issues. After the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, prayer replaced sacrifice. The Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, or duchenin, as people call it, is an ancient practice that was incorporated into our prayers. It is a prayer the Kohanim give to the congregation, and it's still seen in some Orthodox communities. I know a few Kohanim that we have at Bethel would love to see it come back. The question then arose, is a physically imperfect Kohen today prohibited from blessing the congregation? The initial statements agree with the Torah position. They are disqualified. But the reason given is more about human nature of the people and not the qualities of the Kohen. In the Mishnah and Tosefta, the rabbis are concerned that the people will be distracted by the disabilities. The people of the community, of the congregation, will be distracted by the disabilities. They will not focus on the prayer, but rather the other physical attributes. But Rabbi Yehuda in a Mishnah even seems to extend the ban to anything that is unusual or strange, which would distract the congregation. The Tosefta seems to acknowledge that it is human nature to stare at something or someone unusual. By prohibiting the disabled Kohen from duchening, the Tosefta seems to be removing a stumbling block, not from the person with the disability, but from the kahal, from the community. The stumbling block is our inability to focus on the right thing. The person, the Kohen, not the disability. Or in other words, we are the ones that struggle to see the person through the disability. But why should the Kohen or the member of the congregation suffer because of our limitation? As Rabbi Eliyahu ben Bloch wrote in his commentary on the Torah, the disqualification of the Kohen with the disability, the mum, isn't because the blessed Creator doesn't want him, God forbid. Rather, it is because of the weakness of people who do not feel the same respect for someone with a disability as for someone who's healthy in every body part. While Rabbi Bloch may be speaking the truth, I'm not content to leave it at that. We live in a society that highly values tolerance, apparently. Our ethical tradition asks that we work on our faults and overcome them. Perhaps the stumbling block here is ours and not the Kohen's. The rabbis of old are concerned that a person with a disability might distract us from our prayers instead of a member of the community who wants to serve God in the community. The person with the disability becomes shunned. We push them aside because of our inability. But our very Tosefta continues and teaches us something very important. It says, but if he, the Kohen, were known in the city, then he is allowed to bless the people. The statement's amazing. The Tosefta is upending the prohibition on the basis of familiarity. We can let Shimon the Kohen bless us even though his hands are gnarled with arthritis, because we know him. He's our friend, the Tosefta imagines. The stumbling block of our perception is removed not by the ban, but by our familiarity with someone, our friendship with someone, our exposure to them. The ability to see the person and to see beyond the disability. This is what we have to strive for. We must overcome our limitations, because it is not the limitations of the Kohen that prevents him from fulfilling his duty. It is the community's limitation that prevents him from fulfilling his potential. Rabbi Benny Lau, who is doing a lot of work both halakhically and politically in Israel on behalf of the disability community, says the public has enormous power to define the place and standing of people with disabilities in society. Our attitude towards the disabled is not decreed from heaven. It rests upon the attention and the responsibility of the entire community. If we know to see the good and the light within each of us, we will succeed in containing every creation, in fixing the place of people with disabilities in the very heart of the community. and in allowing each and every person to take a part in our shared effort to repair the world by the light of the Torah. I think the disability is ours, not the Kohen's. So let's work to overcome our own stumbling blocks so each person in our community can be seen, can act, and be truly full members of Kalal Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom.